God, I want to know how you designed me to live, but I feel like there's so much going on in my life. I have these questions, but I haven't taken the time to look for answers. I mean, I've heard these things before: holiness, grace, righteousness. But what do they really mean? How can I make them a part of my life? Can I really change?
You might have noticed that a lot of times people use grace and mercy synonymously. You know what I mean? But the thing is, they're significantly different. Mercy is when we don't, or is when we not getting what we deserve. I need my slide there. And then grace is getting what we don't deserve, right? Getting something that we don't deserve. So mercy is more like a pardon, where grace is more like a gift. Make sense? So, it's crazy, but like God could have just chose to forgive us, and that would have been amazing, but he takes it even a step further than that. So this past week, it was Valentine's Day, this past Wednesday, and how many people celebrated Valentine's Day? I guess it was Singleness Awareness Day for some of us, you know what I mean? But, how many people like Valentine's Day? All right, so mixed bag. And you know what's interesting? I found out some people, they don't like Valentine's Day. And like, they're not shy to tell you how they really feel. Like the other day, people were telling me like, oh man, I hate Valentine's Day. It's such a Hallmark holiday. It's such a commercial holiday. Like, you should be doing nice things for your significant other all year round. And like, you can't get a reservation at any restaurant, and the prices of flowers and food are all jacked up. I'm like, okay, cool, you don't like it, I get it, calm down, it's fine. But, I actually like Valentine's Day. Yeah, it's a little bit commercial, but at the same time, I think it's a great time just to tell somebody you care about them, somebody that's special to you. And on Wednesday, I was scrolling around on Instagram, and I was seeing all the Valentine's Day posts. And, of course, there were sentimental posts and pictures of the gifts and stuff like that. And, I noticed that some of the gifts were like pretty, elaborate. Candlelit dinners, rose petals scattered everywhere, elaborate flower arrangements, and like chocolate fondues. I'm like, this is some pretty extravagant stuff you guys got going on. And so I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna Google like most extravagant like Valentine's Day gifts. So I'm looking at this list, and some of the things on the list were this: someone filled up an entire house with roses. I was like, and the thing is, it took an entire florist to do that one order. That was their business for the season. And then another one was a wife bought her husband a Bentley, $300K for a Bentley. I was like, this is really extravagant. This is crazy. And I almost couldn't believe it. And then I was really blown away by the number one thing on the list. Are you ready? David Beckham bought his wife an $8 million necklace. I was like, $8 million? Like, what makes a necklace worth $8 million? Like, is there infinity stones in that thing? Like, $8 million? I'm like, this is insane. This is crazy. This is lavish. This is way too over the top. This is illogical. It doesn't make any sense. And man, the grace of God is an illogical, over the top, extravagant gift that doesn't make any sense. Man, it's crazy. It's crazy. It really is. And I love what Max Lucado says. He says, God's grace has a drenching about it, a wildness about it, a whitewater riptide turn you upside downness about it. Max Lucado's got some bars on the low. Like, don't sleep on him, Rob. Don't sleep on him. But seriously, man, grace is an unearned, undeserved gift of grace. And it's not a loan. It's not something that God gives us and we pay him back later by the good things that we do. It's just a free gift. And I don't know if you're like me, but I'm normally like a little bit skeptical when it comes to hearing about really good things. Especially when it comes to advertisements, I'm like, well, if it sounds too good to be true, then it probably is. You know what I mean? And we see all these ads. I don't know if you've seen this one or not, but there's this ad for like if you take a pill, it's supposed to help improve your brain power and your cognitive functioning. And it's like, you can crush it at work by 243% if you take this pill. I'm like, yeah, if I'm gonna take this pill, I'm gonna become Bradley Cooper from Limitless. Hopefully the side effects are not there, but just kind of over the top, ridiculous. Another ad I saw recently was like, if you take this pill, you don't have to change your lifestyle, you don't have to change your diet, you could keep eating, Dunkin' Donuts every day, 3 meals a day, and you're gonna be ripped like The Rock. Sign us up, right? And or those emails where you inherited $43 million, all you have to do is wire $5,000 to us for fees and you'll get your $43 million. It's kind of like, yeah, right. The grace of God almost sounds too good to be true, but it's not. It's actually that good. There's no catch. There's no side effects. The grace of God is really all that. And it's just amazing. But you might be sitting there and you might be saying, like, why do I need the grace of God anyway? Well, when I was in college, I was taking this particular economics class. And, if you took economics class in college, you can remember that they're usually pretty boring. Did you guys say that? They're pretty boring. I would agree. I was a finance major, so I took a lot of economics classes. But this one particular class was like anything but boring. The professor was super engaging. He just told a bunch of interesting stories. Oh, and check this out. He looked like the grandfather from the movie Up. Y'all seen that? Dude just looked just like him. Like, it was insane. And so he was a funny dude. I really liked him. He's one of those types, he would wake up at like 4 o'clock in the morning and he would go to Starbucks at 5 and he'd be reading through the newspaper. And he would bring in articles to class for us to talk about and discuss. And I don't remember like what the particular article that generated this discussion was, but all of a sudden in class, we're talking about, religion and faith, and my teacher, he knew I was a faith guy, so he's asking me questions. We're having this big discussion in economics class for like 20 minutes about, God and faith and what does it mean to be a Christian and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, my teacher says something like this. He goes, I've been with the same woman since high school. I've never killed anybody. I pay my taxes. What does God want? Why do I need forgiveness? And so what he was really saying was that he didn't feel like he needed forgiveness. He didn't really feel like he needed the grace of God. And, you may have heard stories, some grandiose story where someone, had done some really terrible things in their past, and they had an encounter with the presence of God, and their life turned around, right, where someone becomes an ex-con, is now a pastor, or someone who was a thief opens up like a charity, and we see kind of these big stories about transformation and grace. But what happens if you're like probably most people in this room, just kind of your average, normal person? You'd say, I'm a good person. I think I'm a little bit better than the average. I try to be kind to people. I follow the law. I try to do the best that I can. I make some mistakes, but overall, I think I'm a good person. Why do I really need forgiveness? I think God will accept me like that. And so it's interesting because I saw this study just the other day from the Social, Psychological, and Personality Science Organization that I found really interesting. And this is a peer-reviewed academic journal, but it showed that people in general believe that they are just, virtuous, and moral, but other people around them aren't quite as moral as they are. So the study basically showed that people think that they're better people than they know. And I see some of you guys looking around at the people next to you. But that's the thing. A lot of times we compare ourselves to other people. We compare ourselves to stories we hear on the news and we think, oh, we're better than that guy. You know what I mean? I'm better than him. Or like, it might not be as overt as that, but I think if we're honest, we might have done this. I know when I was reading the study, I thought the same thing. So the thing is, we're often comparing ourselves to other people. We think this is the comparison. But in reality, the comparison isn't between us and other people. The comparison is between us and God, between God's standard and us. And last week, we talked about the word holy. And the word holy, it means set apart. It means that God stands alone, that there is no one like him. And that he is just completely good in every way. He's all loving, he's all powerful, he's self-existent, and he's just incredible. And when you get a glimpse of God, man, everything changes. And I remember in the Gospels when Peter, he was in the presence of Jesus, he just said, turn away from me. Don't even look at me for such a wicked, wretched man that I am. Like, don't even gaze upon me. And I remember even in my own life when I got a revelation about who God really was. And I'm just like, man, God is just so majestic. He's so beautiful. He's so holy. And I just got a glimpse of my own kind of condition, my own state. And I just realized, man, that I'm a sinner and that I need a Savior. And so God's standard is perfection because he is perfect. In Romans 3:23, it says, "For all have sinned and fallen short of God's glorious standard." And so there's this gap that's created between God and us because of our sin. Are you following me? All right. We still awake out there? All right, good. So other religions teach that you need to do something to get right with God. You need to pray, you need to fast, you need to do good deeds, and if you do enough, you might make up for the bad things that you've done, and God will accept you, and you'll have a good afterlife or something like that. And there's even this kind of idea that we're trying to balance out the scales. Yeah. So we're trying to balance out the scales with our good deeds, that if we do a little bit more good things than bad, then God will accept us. In other traditions, there's an angel and a demon on opposing shoulders, and you gotta resist the devil, and you gotta follow the angels leading more times than not, something like that. But Christianity is completely unique in this regard. It says that there's nothing on your own that you can do to make up for the things that you've done. And I like this illustration that Dr. Craig Hazen uses from Biola University. All right, so I want you to imagine that you're in San Diego, beautiful San Diego, and you're standing out on this pier right there, all right? Man, I'd love to have that weather right now. Anyway, it's supposed to be 70 on Wednesday, so I'm ready for that. But anyway, yeah, I got some claps on that. So it's 70 degrees outside. You're in San Diego. You're looking out over the pier. There's just a beautiful breeze. You're looking at the Pacific Ocean, and you're faced with this challenge. You need to jump from San Diego to Hawaii. All right, just follow me here for a second, all right? I'm not crazy. All right, so, you do what you got to do. You get loose, you kind of get your mojo on, right? And you get a running start, and you run, and you jump off of the pier, and you make it 10 feet, all right? And so just for a reference, by the way, Hawaii is 2,521 miles from San Diego. I Googled it just to make sure. But anyway, that's how far it is. So you jump 10 feet, you swim back to shore, you're standing on the pier once again, and you're like, you know what? I'm going to come back to this point next year, and I'm going to try it again. So you decide, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to train with the best long jumpers in the world. I'm going to hire the best athletic trainers, and you're weight training, you're foam rolling, you're doing cryotherapy, you're doing yoga, you're doing hot yoga, you're doing every single thing that you can think of. You're changing your diet, you're eating non-GMO, organic, gluten-free, everything you can get your hands on. You're even eating kale, you know what I'm saying? All sorts of green stuff. And you're like, I'm changing my diet. You get the best gear that you can get, and you train, and you post all of your workouts to Instagram. Actually, please don't do that. It doesn't really help, and it's kind of annoying. But no, I'm kidding. But seriously, you're training every single day for 365 days. Blood, sweat, and tears, every single thing that you have in your body. You've never worked like this in your life. And 1 year later, you find yourself on this pier again. And you do your routine, you're getting loose, you're doing what you got to do, and you got the Rocky theme music going, Eye of the Tiger, you're getting yourself pumped up, and man, you get your running start, and you jump again. And this time, check it out, you make it 12 feet and 4 inches. You still have 2,521 miles to go. After all that work, after all that effort, after all that money and time and energy, I only jumped 2 feet further? Like, seriously? 2 feet? And the whole point of this illustration, man, is just that there is a gap that's created between us and God that's insurmountable on our own. No amount of effort, no amount of years, no amount of training is making up that gap. You follow me? So, I think we just need to understand that God is a holy and righteous God, and he can't just look the other way when it comes to sin. That wouldn't make him a holy and just God. And so that's why sin must be punished. And without forgiveness, we would be separated from God and everything good, and that's what hell really is. And obviously, we know what the good news is, but the thing is, no matter whether you consider yourself a good person or a bad person, whether you're Mother Teresa or you've committed murder, every single person needs grace. Grace puts us all on equal ground. You know what I mean? Yeah. So Ephesians 2:8 and 9 sums it up really well. Really well. That was weird. Really well. It says, "For it is by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not from yourselves. It is the gift of God, not by works, so that no man can boast." So if you imagine you were guilty in court, it's not a perfectly analogous scenario, but Jesus came in and he paid the fine that you owe, right? Justice would still be served upon him, but you get a pardon. And I think that's a good illustration, but I don't want you to lose sight. This is not just a transactional thing. And I don't want you to miss God's heart, because he loves you with a burning passion. And in John 3:16, one of the most famous verses in the Bible, says that God so loved the world that he gave his only one and only Son, so that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. Man, it says that God so loves the world, that he so loves you, and that he's crazy about you, and that he's burning with passionate love for you, and that's why he pours out his grace. And that's why, man, there's no gap that God's grace can't bridge. All right? There's no gap that God's grace can't bridge. And that's why it's called the gospel of grace. All right, I know I scared Sam, I'm sorry, but I want to wake you up. It's called the gospel of grace, man, because it's good news. And God said that, man, that even though that we fell short and we were separated by this gap, that he was going to come in, he was going to take the penalty that we deserved upon himself. And he did that so that we could be forgiven, so that we could have new life. And man, this gift of grace is just unbelievable, and there's nothing like it. You know what I mean? It's awesome. I'm messing the camera people up. I'm sorry. All right, so it's just a gift of grace. So we've talked about 2 things so far tonight. One, we defined grace a little bit. The second thing is we talked about why we need grace. And now I want to talk about what grace looks like on display, because I think grace is best understood when we see it and when we feel it. All right, so we're going to look at a familiar passage in Luke 15. So if you want to turn over there, we'll also have the verses on the screen. Okay. So Luke 15, we're going to start in verse 1. It says, "Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, 'This man welcomes sinners and eats with them.'" So I just want to stop right there. So first, Jesus intentionally always talks to the most kind of outcasted, the most broken, the people that other people don't like. And we see Jesus doing that all the time. And so the Pharisees have a problem with that, and they're kind of the religious leaders, the teachers of the day. They're like, who is this man that welcomes sinners? And I love Jesus' response to their accusation. It's almost like he's saying, you think I just welcome sinners? You have no idea how much I love these people. Let me tell you the story so you can see how much I love these people. So he tells 2 other stories, and then he tells this third one. So we're picking up in verse 11. Jesus continued, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all that he had and set off in a distant country, and there he squandered his wealth in wild living. After he spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and I will go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him, and he ran to his son. He threw his arms around him and he kissed him. And the son said to his father, 'I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For the son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came to near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. 'Your brother has come home,' he replied, 'and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound.' The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, 'Look, all these years I've been slaving for you, and I never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him?' 'My son,' the father said, 'you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost, and then he was found.'" So I'm going to ask the band to come up quickly. But this story, man, is just so powerful, and it's such a great representation of the grace of God. Now, the first thing is there's a couple details in the story that are important. One, this was written or really spoken first to a Jewish audience. So there's some details specific to that audience. And the first thing is that we want to talk about is he says to his father that he wants the inheritance, but yet his father's still alive. So he's basically saying to his father, "I wish you were dead because I want your money." And dishonor of your father in this culture was like, off the charts. And so he does that. He leaves with these possessions. The whole community would have known about it. It's a tight-knit community. And he goes, and he blows it all on a couple weekends in Vegas. How would you feel if your child took your hard-earned money and blew it on a couple weekends in Vegas? Like, that would not make you happy. And so we also know that he committed sexual sin, I'm sure among another of other sins, but like, he's just finding himself in a broken place feeding pigs. He's like, it doesn't get any lower than this. This is I've kind of hit rock bottom. They won't even give me food from the pigs to eat. So he's thinking, he's like, man, what am I going to do? How am I going to get out of this situation? And he's like, you know what? I'm going to go back to my father's. I'm going to come up with this little speech, and I'm going to say this little scenario. I'm going to give him a little monologue to my father about why he should let me back. I'll be a servant. Maybe I'll earn my way back someday, right? So he goes home, and he's ready to give his speech and everything like that. But his father sees him, and it says he sees him, a long way off, and he goes running to him. And in that day, it was disgraceful for men to run because they would have to pick up their robe to run. But the father didn't care, man. He had so much passion, he just ran to his boy. He didn't care. And so he gets to his son. His son's trying to deliver his speech. His father doesn't care. He's just hugging him. He's kissing him. And he's telling people to come quick because he's like, man, we need to put the best clothes on him. He fits him in a Tom Ford suit. He gives him the best shoes. Man, he puts a ring on his finger. And the ring is significant because it symbolizes family heritage. He was accepting him back into the family. And even further than that, it gave him authority to make purchases. So it was like, give him a credit card. You know what I mean? And so if that all weren't enough, right, after all of that, he goes, we're going to throw you a party. And we're going to get the juiciest filet mignon, the freshest lobster tail. We're going to get you the oldest wine. We're going to have the freshest DJ. It's going to be lit. And there's going to be dancing all night long. I'm serious. This is incredible. Like, he probably came home thinking he was going to be reprimanded, that he was going to have to work for years. And his father gives him his best clothes and throws him a party. It's extravagant. It's grace. It's a gift of God. And there's a similar story in the Buddhist tradition, all right? So there's a son that goes off and dishonors his father. He realizes the error of his way, and he comes back home. But the ending of the story is completely different. In this story, when the son comes home, he's not welcomed by his father, hugging him and kissing him. He has to make up for all the things that he's done wrong. So he ends up having to repay the debt, and he shovels poop for 25 years to make up for his debt. That's a lot different than the gospel of grace. So I mentioned John Newton in the beginning, and the reason he wrote those words is because he realized the error of his way. He was a brash man. He had a huge role, or significant role, I should say, in the slave trade. And he missed grace a few times along the way. It wasn't until he was retired that he came to experience the grace of God. And he was studying the scripture, and he was just overwhelmed by God's acceptance and his love and forgiveness, and he repented. And it was out of that place that he wrote this song that's still touching lives today. And so, I just want to say, man, in the last couple of weeks, preparing for this message, I've been reading books about grace. I've been watching sermons on grace. I've been reading the scriptures about grace. I've been singing songs about grace. I've even been dreaming about grace. Man, I've just been living in grace, and it's just a great place to live. And, even last night, I was getting ready to kind of wrap up my notes and stuff, and I just sat down at my desk, and I was thinking about all the things that have happened in my life over the last 6 or 8 years, and good and bad, kind of the notable things that have happened. And I just remember, being in college and different struggles that I had, or different good things that I had with basketball and playing Division I basketball, and being able to travel around and meet people, and graduating college and how exciting that was. Career changes. When I got the call that my dad was in a serious car accident, or that my mother was diagnosed with cancer, or other good things that have happened in my life with the church, or just other things I've been a part of. And as I look back, I was like, man, I could see God's grace in all of it. And I know God's grace is in every single season. It's available. And I was just reminded that God was saying to me, because I try to do so much for God, I really am passionate about doing that. But I feel like God just reminded me, and he said, I love you for you. There's nothing that you could do to make me love you more, and there's nothing that you could do that would make me love you less. And man, this is the gospel of grace. There's nothing like it. I like what Philip Yancey said. He said that we never sink so far that God's grace will not reach us. At the same time, grace does not leave us there. It raises us to new heights. Man, I just want to stand together because I want to celebrate kind of what God's doing in the building tonight. And man, I just want to tell you that this book right here, this book is not just a list of rules and regulations. This book, man, is a love story. It's a passionate love story about the grace of God. And man, I'm just telling you that the grace of God doesn't end with salvation. The grace of God doesn't end with salvation. It's just the beginning. And the grace of God takes us into new life. The grace of God takes us into freedom. The grace of God brings us into the family of God where we can be sons and daughters. It's amazing. And so, man, I want you just to celebrate right now, because I believe there's people in here that are moving from brokenness to health. They're moving from sickness to health. They're moving from death to life. They're moving from mourning into joy. So let's just praise. Let's just sing together. It's going to be awesome.